I just feel so defeated.
Yeah, that clip is me right about now. I'm not gonna force you to play therapist or anything, but if there was ever a video where I ask you to like, comment, subscribe, and share, it's gonna be this one. But for this video, I'm just gonna sit back and go over what I would do for a new Dead Rising game. I've been asked to actually go over something like that from time to time, and I've been tinkering away at a new Dead Rising write-up for quite a few years now. So, let's finally cover that. Here are the segments I'll be covering in the video. This is just going to be a picture show, so you can listen along if you prefer to do so. No need to watch. So despite what the title of the video may say, this would not be Dead Rising 5. It would actually be a game called Dead Rising X. A part of this was because the game was conceptualized before Dead Rising Deluxe Remaster came out, or was even announced, and it would have been the 10th entry in the franchise. Thanks, DRDR. When I die, I hope Capcom is my gravedigger so they can let me down one last time. But the other reason is that Dead Rising X would be a bridge title, taking place between 2 and 3. Yes, I do think Dead Rising 4 should be treated as non-canon moving forward, but instead of ripping that band-aid off right away, I'd rather have a tie-in game to make the series popular again, and then just have Dead Rising 5 quietly ignore the events of 4 and focus on the loose ends from 3. Or preferably, its own story. Besides, there's a 10-year gap between Dead Rising 2 and 3. The museum in 3 may have said nothing of interest happened during that time, but this would hardly be the first time the franchise contradicted its own story to make a sequel. If anything, every Dead Rising game is designed as if it'd be the last. Not that it matters, since this story wouldn't be directly connected to the Santa Cabeza storyline, as that's also something future games need. There needs to be conflicts that aren't connected to the Dead Rising 1 characters for there to be any natural longevity. Now, for the two main playable characters, there's Ricky Claymore, who is the main character, and Hank Redhill, the co-op character. Both of them are part of the AZU, the military's anti-zombie unit that you see at the end of Dead Rising 2. Ricky serves as the newest member. Before her, it was Hank. Ricky is 26 while Hank is 29. For visual reference, Ricky looks like Claire Redfield with black hair and a bit more muscle to her, while Hank is a deeply tanned man with deep 5 o'clock shadow. While the main plot of this hypothetical game is still up in the air, I did know what I wanted the state of the world to be, in part out of my dissatisfaction with some of Dead Rising 3's world building. So, between the collapse of Phenotrans and Stacy and Chuck's activism, the government actually did step up to take over Zombrex production, even creating a version of it that lasts for a week known as Goldbrex, or Golden Zombrex. Plus, all 3 versions of it, the 12-hour, 24-hour, and 7-day versions, are far more affordable. This borderline backfired, as infection became impossible to keep up with, as people were able to purchase Zombrex at far less frequent intervals from a wider variety of locations. This is something that would nearly ruin Ricky's life. While working her job in fast food, there's groaning going on from the women's restroom. Ricky goes in to check and leaves with a bite wound. This naturally ends her career, as what restaurant's going to want somebody infected with the zombie virus, and hinders any attempts at a new one, as even after taking Zombrex, it's not a good thing for a resume, but something you're required to share. She gets dumped by the guy she was dating, and was already estranged from her family well before any of this happened. But one day, opportunity quite literally came knocking on the door in the form of a local state official. Some progress had been made on a cure, and they're looking for test subjects with her specific blood type. It requires to sign a waiver in case it kills you, but she was on the verge of just letting the infection take her at this point. May as well die for science, I guess. The first test was giving them a special dose of Zombrex to the volunteers. While they were in separate rooms, Ricky could hear a few of them screaming from a Zombrex overdose. Then it was waiting to see if this actually cured them. For an hour, there would be the pattern of hearing groans from another room, followed by a gunshot. And finally, reintroducing the infection through the wasp. This is because the queens are the only surefire way to get somebody infected, as people have been known to get scratched or even bit, yet still not develop the parasite through sheer luck. In the end, Ricky approaches the scientist in charge of this as the sole survivor of the trial, and asks with optimism if this means that they've discovered the cure. They don't sugarcoat it. Ricky's survival is the worst-case scenario for them, as it means after 5 years of research with what they could gather from Phenotrans, the cure is so hyper-specific that with over 30 people who they tried it on, only one was properly cured. The formula could need adjustment for anything, from muscle to body fat to biological sex to medication to your age or bone marrow for all they know. And unless they find somebody naturally immune, that's not changing. Haunted by that knowledge, Ricky leaves the ghost town and heads home. and soon discovers a problem she could have never imagined having. What now? She's cured and will never need Zombrex again, but she can't reveal this to anyone, and at this point, would she even want to? Does she have any interest in contacting anyone she knew? Her old workers and her ex never made an attempt to contact her again. Pondering on this? No, she doesn't. And that reality was miserable. One day, on a trip to the store, and in a desperate bid to give her mind something to focus on, starts checking the newspapers. And tucked far away in one of them is an ad to join the AZU. She knew it didn't pay well. It's an open secret at how poorly funded they were after the Fortune City operation. When it came time to replace them, they made regional divisions to cover outbreaks anywhere, but to not increase the budget only covered the building maintenance for their bases. The AZU would soon have to resort to civil forfeiture laws to justify looting any locations an outbreak took place in. For all the ire it may have brought them, it was the only kind of emergency funds they'd have to feed their soldiers. But from her perspective, this was a place to stay rent-free when she was struggling to get a job, and she's quite possibly the only person in the country immune to the infection. From where she's standing, seems like a calling. Upon entering, she quickly found herself in the role of the head chef. She has experience, and this band of brothers are nicer than any customers at her old job. Under the codename of Duchess, the previous new recruit, Hank, aka 8-Ball, helped her refine her combat skills with firearms and CQC. When the money was good, she cooked their meals. When the money was tight, she handed out their portions. The goal for Ricky as a character was to make somebody who would have a disdain for the undead that would justify the gameplay of combo weapons and killing zombies en masse. She also needed to be capable of eliciting both empathy and apathy for the other survivors, since they can be saved, ignored, or killed at the player's discretion. And with this backstory, I think I achieved that goal. As for Ricky and Hank in-game, their banter would be based off Frank and Chuck's back and forth in Case West. Ricky is the more expressive, outgoing, and cocky of the two, while Hank is a more stoic, no-nonsense kind of man. Ricky has to actively lose patience with someone before she gets rude, while Hank will speak his mind without much hesitation. That angle was based on the back and forth of Nick and Dick in Dead Rising 3. While I doubt there would be much story use for Hank, letting them comment on each other as they change outfits or interact with what they find would go a long way. However, for any future details, I would need to actually finish the plot. So, for the general gameplay, I'd use Dead Rising 2 as the baseline. This means the controls for that game are used as the template. X to attack, Y to call survivors, RT for skill moves, L3 to dodge, bumpers to swap weapons, the works. The biggest change in controls would be to accommodate the features from other Dead Rising games. Pressing the right trigger with the right bumper lets the player craft on the fly, while the left bumper has Ricky and Hank pull out a disposable camera. I'll go over those individual mechanics later, but I do mean toggle. Or in other words, you don't have to hold down the button to maintain the modes. When the camera is out, Y and A will zoom in and out, X takes a photo, and B leaves. For crafting, just use a control stick to select the option, press A to craft, press B to exit. The movement would be slightly faster than the Dead Rising 2 saga. Specifically, Chuck with his first speed upgrade is Ricky and Hank's default speed, and Chuck at max with the sports fan outfit is their max speed. Throwing damage would definitely be buffed, with a maxed out range stat being on par with Nick's throwing damage. Seriously, go use gemstones in Dead Rising 3, they're surprisingly powerful against zombies. Money would also return, with Off the Record being used for the basis of the economy. What can I say? Dead Rising benefits from an interactive map, and money gives you more motivation to interact with things, both in the context of getting it and needing it. This would also mean combo vehicles would be taking a step back to the combo bikes of Dead Rising 2. I know a lot of people like the death machines that you can build, and there's really no other series that does combo vehicles like Dead Rising does, unless a new Twisted Metal comes out with a zombie kill mode. But I'd rather have the larger vehicles be in and of themselves the rewards with the mass kill potential. I would be bringing back a detail from Deluxe Remaster though, where the vehicles can be moved between load zones if the door is big enough. Oh right, load zones. That would definitely annoy a lot of people, but I think they're very important to Dead Rising. The typical survival horror game encourages the player to take their time and conserve resources. But in Dead Rising, items indefinitely respawn, and time is the finite resource. And load zones are crucial for players knowing when an item respawns. Dead Rising 3 tried to have items spawn on a timer, but it just didn't work out. During normal gameplay, there's no reason to wait when you have the weapons locker, and in Nightmare mode, you quite literally don't have the time to wait. The final reason for the major gameplay being based on Dead Rising 2 is that, while combo weapons were strong, base weapons were still really good. They could receive the benefits of all the books, be given to survivors, and were still strong enough to deal with zombies, basic human enemies, and even psychopaths. Or in other words, the game was designed with the knowledge that the player doesn't know how to build every weapon and what the best thing is. That should be a core element of the game. Combo weapons are a bonus. They should not be the main mechanic, no matter how expansive they get. Okay, we got the 2 playable characters and the general gameplay. Where does all this take place? Well, I'm gonna use my home state as Indiana for the general location. Part of it is because this isn't a place fiction really covers, so there's the basic novelty of people going, really? But also, Indiana just so happens to be the birthplace of the modern-day theme park. Holiday World was originally known as Santa Claus Land, and it was from, get this, Santa Claus, Indiana. And since the Indianapolis Motor Speedway isn't a great location for a Dead Rising game, I say we finally give this franchise a theme park location. But unlike Holiday World, which is largely a water park with coasters, we're going to be taking jabs at larger parks, mostly Disney if I'm being honest, with a glorified shopping mall-style theme park. So, in the fictional town of Valentine, Indiana, hey, also a Resident Evil reference, Ricky and Hank find themselves deployed at the Multiversal Amusement Park. The term multiversal is not only just a parody of Universal's name, it's also how it's actually structured. The idea is that each walled-off section of the park is a separate quote-unquote world or a dimension, and there are portals that connect them together, so the guests show up to literally visit far-off lands. The employees who work here will be referred to as the Creationeers, and they help turn these worlds into a safe place for boys and girls of all ages to explore. You can definitely see the mockery of the Bob Iger company at play here. Now, while I never made an exact layout, the map would follow a similar structure of Fortune City, with it being circular in nature and having nearly every place connect to the center district. Now, let's dive into those distant worlds you'd explore and some of the sights you can see real quick. Obviously, the Uranus Zone would have to return. This would be where the rides that can kill zombies are found, since it's meant to be the adult section of the park. Really, how it appeared in Off the Record would be pretty accurate, with the same stores and costumes available, just maybe a slightly different layout. Right next to the Uranus Zone would be Casino 51, the other adult section of the park. There would still be slot machines found at various parts of the park, it'd be one of the biggest controversies about it, but Casino 51 is the devoted gambling section, complete with a massive high-risk, high-reward slot machine from the Slot Ranch Casino, and the giant craps table from the Royal Flush Plaza. In fact, just think of any gambling minigame from Dead Rising 2 you like, and imagine it's there. This is also where you'd find the dealer and bartender uniforms. On the other hand, there's Medieval Ages, about as opposite thematically as you can get. This is meant to be a retread of Medieval Village from Dead Rising 4, with a few twists. Think the Wizarding World of Harry Potter meets medieval times. This place is more so for the items you find in the shops, rather than any PP activities. Burger Fiefdom with the Knight's outfit would obviously be here, but this would also house an example of an outfit that changes based on who wears it. The Jester costume would be available here. Ricky's version is black and red, while Hank's version is orange and purple. The theming for the Wild Wild West should be right in the title. This would feature a large stage play, a wild bull machine that you can ride for some prestige points, a barbecue restaurant, and a gun shop with a shooting range. The bar would feature drinks for both kids and adults, and the various buildings would have dartboards that give a PP bonus if you can get a bullseye with a dart or an arrow. There's a cowgirl outfit, a sheriff outfit, and an old-timey bank robber costume lying around. Slappy Land would be the kids section of the park. Thankfully, zombie kids are not a thing in the game, and Slappy Land will consistently be the least populated area of the park. You'll mostly find toys here, but there's a fake doctor's office nearby with some legit medical supplies to loot. The player would be able to dress up as Slappy, but a quote-unquote naughty version of it could be found. The actual purpose of that, though, is to let the player dress up as Misty from Pokemon. Seriously, it's weird how similar their costumes are. Since Slappy Land would be on the smallest side of things, there are two other little areas connected without the need of a low zone. Highway 45, a kart racing zone, and Electrotopia, an arcade. For the obligatory under construction location, we have No Man's Land. It's meant to be a water park that's reminiscent of Disney's Snow White, mostly the mines that the dwarves were in. There would be large glowing crystals that you can use like rocks back in the first Dead Rising. You can find mining equipment for the thematics, and actual construction equipment they were using. Costume-wise, you'll mostly find swimsuits in the construction uniform here. Then there's the food court, or rather the food port. I'm a little too proud of that one, it's not even a good joke. This is another element taken from Dead Rising 4, with the idea being that the food they're selling has been found and transported here from around the world, even if it's almost entirely fast food. There's a large ship that would serve as a sit-down restaurant. The waiter's outfits for it would be based on the classic outfits of Nami and Zoro, depending on who's wearing them. The last major location is the safe house, which would be a small hotel. There would be a vent in the parking lot to get in and out safely. There's no weapons locker in this game, but the clothing locker returns from Dead Rising 3. Some of the survivors you save will be on the rooftop to serve as snipers to take care of any stragglers. Now, in Dead Rising tradition, there would still be your typical stores found throughout these locations, but I figured those weren't as important to cover. I just wanted you to know what you'd be able to expect exploring. Ricky starts at level 1, Max is at level 50. You know the drill. The level ups would go back to being semi-random like they were in the previous games, but there's a little more structure this time. Every time you level up, Ricky will get a random stat increase and a random attribute card. First, let's go over those stats. Health and inventory upgrades work like they did beforehand. You max out at 12, but this time you start with a 5th health block and a 5th inventory slot. This is because, due to some changes I'll go over later, the game might actually be harder for new players, so this gives you a bit more of a starting edge. Attack power now determines all physical attacks and anything you physically throw, but it does not affect guns. The range stat would determine how fast and how far weapons are thrown, so that way you don't need to level up 2 separate stats like you did in Dead Rising 1. This also determines how many zombies are hit by items with lock-on properties, like the soccer ball, and the movement stat works as it always did. On to the new stats. First is crafting speed. This is another rare one similar to movement speed, and you only get 3 ticks of it. And well, it allows the on-the-fly crafting to be done faster. By default, it takes 10 seconds to make a weapon without a workbench. But with all 3 points, it takes 4 seconds. Second is leadership. This determines how many favorite items each survivor will have. Think Dead Rising Deluxe Remaster. Finally, there's the luck stat. Ricky starts with 2 points and can get 13 more. By itself, this stat doesn't do anything, but what it does do is affect several small interactions. This includes, but are not limited to, the odds of winning a slot machine, the maximum amount of money from cash registers, how long zombies are frozen or stunned, how fast zombies bleed to death, how long slipping hazards remain in play, and giving QTEs more generous windows or inputs. When all 15 points are acquired, Ricky has a luck stat of 45%. As for the attribute cards, those are much easier to explain, thankfully. There's only 3 kinds. The first are perks, which are more indirect upgrades, like unlocking the ability to swap out certain items when making combo weapons. The second are skill cards for skill moves. Most of this is stuff you'd seen before, but you'd have both Dead Rising 2 and Off the Record's dodge rolls, with the latter being accessed by dodging while holding the skill move button. RT and B would let the player grab an enemy sleeping dog style, although human enemies will instantly break out if not stunned, and zombies will eventually bite you if you hold them for too long. From here, more moves can be unlocked and used, like the franchise staple Lift Up. This is so that way you can get a lot of actions out of a single interaction. And this game would see the return of unlockable Street Fighter moves, in the form of the Chin Buster, the Tatsumaki, and at level 50, the Hadouken. And finally, combo cards. Yep, we're going back to combo cards from Dead Rising 2. Actually, you might have guessed that already. Regardless, let's go over what's different about them. First, the combo card has more actions locked behind it. You can still use the workbenches to build any combo weapon if you have the parts for it, but on-the-fly crafting needs the proper card. A scratch card will not suffice. Plus, on top of not having access to the heavy attack, any airborne attacks are also locked behind the card now. So, that means the Defiler no longer instantly wins the game at level 1. Crafting on the fly now uses up a resource. The player finds a roll of duct tape early on and can use it to build a weapon on the fly, but it needs to be replaced afterwards back at the hotel. Additional objects like electrical tape, zip ties, superglue, and industrial bolts can be found hidden around the map. Think of like how Zombrex was back in Dead Rising 2. These increase the maximum number of on-the-fly crafts you can get before needing to refresh. Pawn shops will also sell extra duct tape to increase that maximum even further. For a price. There are now multiple different buffs a card can get. Some will still give the double PP, but others can now give double ammo, 50% more durability, the ability to fit in your inventory, being able to be made without using up duct tape, or a more unique perk related specifically to that weapon. 6 of Ricky's default combo cards would show this off. The Spiked Bat gives double PP, the Molotov no longer needs duct tape to be made, the Tactical Handgun gets double ammo, the Tenderizers last 50% longer, the Paddle Saw fits in the player's inventory, and the Dynamite's explosion is delayed to distract zombies for longer before going off. I do have a full list of combo weapons for this game, and maybe one day I'll go over them in their entirety, but for now, here's the cliff notes. Most of the returning combo weapons would be from Dead Rising 2. They have a lot of unique elements to them, and they haven't been seen for a while. That said, I did pick some favorites from Case West, Off the Record 3, and even 4. Every Dead Rising sequel to 2 got at least 3 or 4 weapons in. New combo weapons are generally tamer compared to 3 and 4. Taping a knife to a pool stick for a makeshift spear, a meat cleaver to a pipe for an axe, or a cinder block to a stand for a hammer. There's definitely still some funny and out there ideas, like dynamite with a bowling ball for a bowling bomb, or whiskey and spray paint for first aid spray, but in general, I wanted to bring back the visual believability of the older games. A new type of combo weapons are called mods. These are what you use the blueprints for. Each blueprint gives you the base weapon, and then you experiment by adding different items to that base weapon for different results. Think of how the Holy Arms and Inferno Arms all use the training sword and shield, or the DEY grenades from Dead Rising 4 having different results based on the chemical you use to make it. Super combo weapons would not be like Dead Rising 3, but instead like the laser gun from Case West and Off the Record, with them being 2 separate combo weapons taped together. The way it would work is mostly through movie posters. If you just observe the poster, Ricky and Hank give their thoughts on it, but if you look at it when you have the combo cards for both components, then you get the combo card. This is so that way they don't utterly break the game in half, and the player's not spoiled on what they can make ahead of time. Yes, I'm talking about item icons. I know, this is pedantic, even for me. But I've always been bothered with how they were designed solely with combo weapons in mind after the first game. And when you get down to it, Dead Rising is a really weird series. Not many games have things like covering a zombie's head with a helmet, making them slip on something, or having massive items that don't fit in your inventory. And, well, skateboards are basically going extinct these days. Regardless, there's a lot of weird mechanics that you can't really transfer skills from other games over to. So, I think the icons should instead focus on those features and mechanics so new players can know at a glance what to expect from any given item. These are the new categories I landed on. Melee. These are for basic close-range weapons, regardless if they're blunt or sharp. Firearms. These not only cover guns, but toy guns and improvised items used like guns. In other words, this category is for anything with ammo. Projectile. These are on the opposite end of the spectrum, as these are ranged weapons that you're expected to go back and retrieve. Slipping hazards. These are for items that can cause zombies to trip, either on hit or upon their destruction. Explosive. They explode. Biohazard. These are items that are meant to directly interact with zombies. The queen jar, the fire extinguisher, the chemical, the hunk of meat, the Roman candle. Anything that has this icon is meant to let you know that it has an interesting reaction with the undead. CQC. These are weapons that are used like boxing gloves, the training sword and shield, or the defibrillators. They have enough quirks with how you apply them to combat that they deserve a separate category. Helmets. The category name is a tad misleading, as it's not just the helmets in here, but really anything that can restrict a zombie from action. Wield. This is for any weapon that can be used like a vehicle. Engine. These are for weapons that need to be revved up to be used. Despite being the smallest category, this is the single most important trait for the player to know about ahead of time. There are 2 furniture icons, one for hefty and one for heavy. The hefty is meant to indicate stuff that after getting a certain perk you actually can fit in your inventory, while heavy items will never fit in the player's inventory. Finally, there are containers. These are items that are specifically designed to drop other items when broken open, like a cardboard box or a handbag. The combo card icon is just for combo weapons. This is in case you bought one from a pawn shop or find it off a survivor, and it's because their utility and interactions with the zombies can vary wildly. The final set of icons I'll show for you are for food. Basic food items, alcohol, and food that can deteriorate. Now, this is a game series made for adults. I don't imagine the target audience needs help figuring out that raw meat will go bad or vodka is alcoholic. But by giving these items separate icons, it makes it clear to the player that there is a reason to distinguish between them, and will get them thinking about that sort of thing. Speaking of food, a friend of mine who also loves the Dead Rising series mentions how broken orange juice is. Or, more accurately, when you have 3 4-block healing items every time you venture out, things have to go really wrong to ever risk dying. So I decided I would make some changes to the healing system in the game. First, and probably biggest, things like milk and orange juice are now personal portions that only heal 2 blocks of health. In fact, most food items only heal 1 to 2 blocks of health, unless they're alcoholic, like booze, or need to be cooked, like meat. However, food items can now be combined to make food hacks. You get the recipes for these by collecting cookbooks and saving survivors. They don't have any special effects and just simply heal more. There would be several of them, far more than hypothetically you need, but the idea is that the more recipes you gather, the more options you have when you duck into any given restaurant to make them. The goal is to make healing more involved than just simply learning where the orange juice spawns like in Dead Rising 1 and 2. Now, mixed drinks would still be in the game, and in fact there would be 2 new ones. The first is Feel Good, which makes it so the user is immune to sickness while getting an extra block of health from all sources. The second is Liquid Luck, which increases the player's luck by 25% and allows more parts of the gameplay to be affected by it, such as having a chance to not take damage from an attack. Spitfire would also be buffed. It would be a combination of its Dead Rising 1 and 2 incarnations, spitting a projectile that does a handgun bullet's worth of damage while lighting a zombie on fire. However, the healing from a lot of mixed drinks would be getting nerfed. Painkiller, Regen, Feel Good, and Liquid Luck would only give you 2 blocks of health on their own. Repulse, Energizer, Quickstep, and Spitfire heal 4. The rest remain unchanged from their traditional recovery values. This is because mixed drinks with even the weakest healing books were way too powerful. This way you need to decide between the healing value and the potency of their effect when making a mixed drink. Food hacks can be placed into a blender, but they're not very reliable, as the game will randomly treat it as one of the ingredients used to make the food hack. So you're not going to know exactly what you're going to get. As I brought up earlier, cooking would be brought back from Dead Rising 1, but if I'm also being honest, I wouldn't lose sleep if it wasn't. Food rotting, on the other hand, would be back in full force and now come in 3 different flavors. First, items that rot if left in your inventory for too long. Sushi, fish, steaks, things like that. Second are food items that actually benefit from being left in your inventory. Ice cream that becomes half melted, milk that turns into buttermilk, cheese turns into blue cheese. And finally, as the 3 days march on, more items start to spawn rotten that previously weren't. And most importantly, red cabbage would return. Wow, I have almost no notes for this one. I mean, photography is pretty cut and dry in the series. I don't really think I need to explain how the 5 main categories work. If you play Dead Rising, you know. There would, however, be 2 new categories. First is conspiracy, or mysterious imagery. Second is scenic, or when the environment itself is the draw. The camera would not run out of batteries, since outside of Dead Rising 1 there's really no need for the mechanic. You can hold up to 50 images, and... I really don't have anything else, actually. And for the final segment, the population of the game itself. For those who may not have noticed, zombies in Dead Rising have different health pools based on their mass, with fat, muscle, and armor increasing their HP. This results in male zombies being more durable than their female counterparts. Many zombies get unique outfits based on the area, bartenders at the bars, cowboys in the Wild West, park employees at the rides, etc. They might be holding a weapon or an item for some extra range, but they're largely interchangeable. There would be special zombies in the game, however. First are the cop zombies, with more health than other zombies, and wielding a nightstick, pistol, and occasionally a shotgun. Biker zombies would also have this extra health bar, and would be the game's knife zombie archetype. Zombies with construction helmets would be immune to headshots again, a feature I've come to really appreciate having played Dead Rising 1 a lot for this channel. Another zombie with extra health would be mechanics found at Highway 45, with large wrenches for extra range and knockdown. As the days march on, short cutscenes would play to show new zombies wandering into the park's front gates, signaling that they're going to join the horde during the gameplay. First are paramedics in hazmat suits with defibrillators and electric prods, but are ironically immune to any form of elemental damage. Next is the military police of the city, with body armor to push their health bars even higher than the other cops. They come equipped with M4 carbines. Then, for something funnier, hockey players. Ah, yes, the famous Indiana Hockey League. No true American would ever forget about them. These guys would be a real nuisance. The hockey sticks would give them absurd range for their swipes, they become chasing zombies if Ricky ever gets too close, and they are resistant to any form of flinching while being immune to any form of slipping. And finally, firefighter zombies are all these traits combined. Their jackets in bulk make them tough like the military police, while making them immune to elemental damage. Their helmets block blows to the head, their fire axes have the damage of the bikers and the range of the mechanics, and they have all the behaviors and endurance of the hockey players. During the nighttime mutation of the Horde, zombies have better eyesight and will actually respond to gunfire. This is particularly dangerous since this is when zombies can use their guns. Biker zombies are now strong enough to take off a block of health with each swing, zombies with blunt weapons will attack twice in a row, and the firefighters can now floor the player on hit. Overall, pretty dangerous. The human enemies would fall back to the classic days. The melee enemies would be called thrill seekers and would look like typical skater punks. These guys and gals don't see the zombies as a big threat and have infested the park looking for ways to amuse themselves. Anything and anyone is just a dare to happen, and they have no issue harassing and attacking people on sight. If you're familiar with modern-day Disney, you can probably guess the kind of people I'm making fun of here. The gun-toting enemies are bowler hat mobsters armed with AK-47s. Think of it like an in-between of the Mafia and the Cartel. They'd be more related to the game's story, so no further details on them here. What I can devolve into are the survivor types. First, you have Mission Control, a character I've not actually given a name to yet. He would be an urban explorer who got banned from the park for trespassing, but came back during the outbreak to snoop around. He found himself locked in the security room, and he'll let you know of any survivors he sees. These are the standard survivors you'd expect from a Dead Rising game. The second kind of survivor combines the stranded survivors of Dead Rising 3 with the scientists of Case West in the form of the park employees. Mission Control deliberately won't alert you to their presence, so you need to go looking for them. If you can help them with whatever they need, they'll head back on their own, but they operate on Dead Rising 1 logic. If you leave the area after meeting them, their health bars will begin to deplete and they eventually die, whereas normal survivors only have that happen once they join you. The final survivor type is the squad mates. These are based off the posse members from Dead Rising 3, and will be given a different colored health bar once they join you to help distinguish from those you're trying to escort to safety. They can still permanently die like any other character, but leaving them behind for too long won't damage them at all. Instead, they'll eventually just return to the hotel on their own. The surviving men of Ricky's military unit will fulfill this role. Injured members still need to be manually escorted back, and any zombified members need to be killed and you need to retrieve the dog tags. But those still fit for battle will immediately become squad mates. You can have up to 2 squad members with you before it starts eating into the survivor limit. The bulletin board from Dead Rising 3 would return as well. Certain combat-ready survivors will become squad mates once you escort them back to the hotel. And as for psychopaths, their UI would combine Deluxe Remaster with Off the Records. But the important detail is that bosses are not getting an arbitrary damage cap. I have never liked this mechanic. Bosses can do high damage, they get super armor to power through attacks, and most of them are pretty quick. Plus, Painkiller has been nerfed pretty bad, so stocking up on 2 to 3 of them doesn't guarantee a win anymore. You could even make it so that certain weapons break faster against human enemies if that's proving to be a problem. So, I'd like to say the issue of them being too easy has been at least addressed, and there's no need to arbitrarily limit how good the player can be against them. And with that, you know at least generally what I would do for a new Dead Rising game. So, tell me, would you be interested in something like this? Like, if a game like this were to actually come out, do you think you would still enjoy it after the honeymoon period ended? Or would you rather just have Dead Rising 5? And would you be interested in more ideas from this hypothetical Dead Rising game? I have entire documents of what I would do for it. And do you also forgive me for making a glorified clip show and calling it a video?